It's my real big pleasure to invite here Mr. Hilmar Örn Hilmarsson, the music composer from Iceland.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you, and I hope I will not bore you for the next 2 hours, and I hope for some participation from the audience, please.
Yes, exactly. Like I think we, as I said on the beginning, this setup was arranged like yesterday night. We met with Hilmar like 2 hours ago, and we spent 2 wonderful hours of very exciting talking about the film and music, and I hope these our common 2 hours would be as same exciting as that 2 hours for us before. Yeah. Maybe we should start with some basic question. When I met with Hilmar, he showed me a few examples of his work, and we all will have a chance to see them during the masterclass. But we open our talk about some thinking or question. So what does it mean to compose a music for the documentary film? There is always that thing that if you do documentaries, there is always ambition of the author and also the ambition, I think, in the part of audience for the authenticity. And so maybe that would be my first question. Hilmar, how you think the good made composed music for documentary film should sound? What is the good music for documentary film?
This was actually a really big challenge for me. I mean, to talk about or think about my documentary filmmaking, because when you make music for documentaries, as some of you or many of you will know, that there is no money in documentaries, so you have to be really passionate about doing it. So I think nearly all of my documentaries have been about subjects which are really close to my heart, and I've managed to get people into it who are playing with me, and also what I find strangely interesting, reflecting on my work between fiction films or the big things is when I'm serving a story, a script, a director's vision, is that in documentaries I always become more involved. It becomes more personal, and I find, maybe because I was drawn to it beforehand, because of an interest, I find that in documentaries my heart is much more in the music.
We talk about heart, but if we move from heart to ears, how does the communication between the heart, the brain, and the ears, how it works? Maybe I will try to ask a little bit differently. You said you are also a composer for the fiction films. Is there any huge, important difference about the question of soundtrack in that passionate documentaries, instant the fiction films, or for you as a composer, the process? Where are the similarities? Where are the things which are in common?
Well, I've been part of this Icelandic film movement, what we would call the Icelandic film spring, where we were always inventing the fire, the wheel, and the toaster, and so everybody was doing everything he or she could do. So we had to make a lot of things out of little things. So going into a documentary thing wasn't that difficult for me, but also is the fact that you have limited resources and you have to try to use them. I mean, you have in a documentary, you maybe have a budget for one solo musician, whereas in a feature film, I mean, you can have an orchestra of 70 people or 46 people or whatever. So in a way, it trains you to adapt what you have and what you can accomplish to this thing. And sometimes, I mean, you want things to sound massive, and then you will have to find out new inventive ways of making it massive.
I think maybe we are going to time when we starting to show some strict examples of your work. But as I said on the beginning, when we met with Hilmar, we opened our discussion with a question. Right now, I'm not so sure if I will be precise in English, but also from my point of view as an author and sometimes documentary filmmaker, I'm thinking about the music a lot. And there are like two ways how to use the music, you know, like there is a diegetic moment and non-diegetic. This is what I'm not sure it works in English. Diegetická a nediegetická. The situation of diegetic music means that there is a music which comes out directly from the situation of the frame, the situation of the screen. But there is also a music which is like the outside music, made because to push out some emotional case, etc. And when we've been talking about this, Hilmar showed me example of his work about the documentary film made up during the Icelandic crisis. And maybe I would ask you, Hilmar, to talk about it a little bit and then to show this example, because I think that's, from my point of view, that's the perfect situation, showing something which works very authentic. It looks like strictly documentary level, or what does it mean? But it's also your own composed music. Can you talk about it for a while?
Yes. Okay. We'll start at that point, which is basically that we start at the high point and then we go down from there. But I don't know how many of you know that we had a big crisis in Iceland in 2008 when our whole banking system collapsed in October and everything went to shit. And the whole nation, which had been really drunk on promises of great glories and a big financial future, had to face up to a really harsh realities. And people were losing their homes and they were losing their livelihoods. And so what happened was that basically people took to the streets and gathered together and became apeshit crazy. I mean, that's the polite word for it. And in the beginning of January in 2009, I was actually teaching a course at the Icelandic Academy of the Arts, where I was doing a course with people who came from the graphic department, the music department, the architectural department, and the theater department, and we were doing classes in the center of Reykjavik. And it was really strange because we were always hearing these noises outside the venue where we were at, and after a while I said, okay, let's just go down to the main square and see what is happening. And so we went and joined the demonstrations. And I am not a political animal, I've never been. But we came back and thought, okay, so we're doing a course in how to connect these different arts and how we interact with society. And so we decided to come up with a program of how we can reflect our artistic things towards what is happening in Iceland. And so what we did was that we sampled lots of clocks waking up signals from different clocks. So we assembled about 200 different watches and alarm clocks, recorded those. We put these samples on stuff on CDs or recordings, and we played them back via boom boxes, and then we took the alarm clocks with us. So we basically became part of that demonstration, which was a very interesting experience for me. And this was at a time when the parliament was being attacked daily by angry crowds. And I thought, okay, I will have to do my duty as a protester. But then I started to look at the poor policemen who were standing outside the parliament, and I was feeling sort of big sympathy because they had all these things thrown at them. And then basically, as you will see in this film clip, some terrible news came out from the Prime Minister, who was hated by everybody. He had to I'll talk to you after the clip, but I'll probably show it to you first.
At 6 p.m., Prime Minister Geir finally addressed the public. His message is not expected.
Komið öll sæl. Ég ætla að fá að lesa hérna smá yfirlýsingu frá sjálfum mér. En ég mun ekki svara spurningum á eftir. Ég ætla að hafa það þannig að þessu sinni. Yfirlýsingin svohljóðandi. Við reglubundna læknisskoðun á Landspítalanum í síðustu viku kom í ljós að mér lítið æxli í vélinda. Síðastliðinn þriðjudag var mig greint frá því að rannsóknar hefðu leitt í ljós að æxlið illkynja. Þetta bara hérna heima um mér. sem að ég fæ þess týndi. En síðan þurfti maður að vinna úr því náttúrulega við huga sér og við heldum hér lítinn fund í fjölskyldunni strax þá. Og síðan dróðast þetta eins og ég hef verið að lýsa.
Þú þurfti bara að mæta í vinnu ákveðna daginn?
Já, ég gerði það náttúrulega. Ég gerði það auðvitað og ég sagði ekki neinum frá þessu að mínum samstarfsmönnum alveg strax ekki. Fyrir en ég var búinn að endanlega ganga frá því í mínum eigin huga hvað ég ætlaði að gera.
Thank you for this. It maybe brings me a probably simple question. From your point of view, what is the role of the music in the documentaries? Like, is it like to bring the emotion, bring the atmosphere, or?
Yes, I think in a way, I mean, this is the essence of what I do when I do music for documentaries, because I'm usually involved because I'm passionate about the subject. And in this sense, I mean, I like any Icelander, I mean, was involved in all these scenes, and what was surprising in this process, because we have a collapse of a system, I mean, both the financial and the political system, and we go through a period of anger, and then we go through a period of grief and denial. I mean, this is a process that's been set out by psychologists. I mean, the process of losing someone or something that is dear to you. And what I felt, I mean, afterwards, and I did this music, I mean, a year after the crisis. I mean, my main feeling was sorrow, and I was very sorrowful, very melancholic. And this section in the middle, which you didn't see subtitled, was our ex-Prime Minister Hilmar Örn talking about that in the middle of the crisis he was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus, and So it was not only the nation that was ill; it was the prime minister who was ill, and this became a very mythological thing. I don't know if you know the story of the Fisher King. When the king is sick, the country is sick. So when the prime minister is sick, I mean, we're all sick. So for me, I mean, just encapsulating these moments of anger and grief and loss were essential. And and when doing it, because I mean, we had this spontaneous revolution where you had middle-aged women like my mother going out with pots and pans and banging things, and it became this weird ceremony in the center of Reykjavik, just banging pots and pans and making noises, and which reminded me of stuff I'd done earlier and which I will refer to later on the voodoo music of Haiti, where people have to have an emotional outlet through noises, percussion, and sounds and songs.
Yeah, as I said on the beginning, like what I find out very interesting from my point of view in this scene is that your composed music is, from my point of view, something which works as same as sound design, as same as emotional music. And that brings me a question, like how the process works. Like you get a rough cut, and it's your decision, okay, I will put music like this over there, or it's like a discussion in between director and you. You know, like because of that pen banging stuff, like I'm wondering, like if it was your idea, okay, I will do like that, it would be like the rhythmical sound, it would sound like authentically, but it will also, and then when the Prime Minister said, okay, I'm sorry, but I have a cancer, we will bring the cello. I'm just asking, like, the process, if you are composed for the rough cut, or if it's like the long dialogues with the directors, etc.
I was actually giving a lot of leeway by the director and the editor, Steffi Tors, who did that. I mean, this is more or less, I mean, frame by frame what she delivered. But in the middle section, when things became really crazy, she had put down some old music of mine, which was very emotional and very moving, and which came as a surprise to me, but also very inspiring. But I mean, the banging on the pots and pans was for me stuff inspirational, because I sat down and worked out frame by frame. Okay, this is hitting at 3 seconds, 23 frames. There's a hit which I need to. So I did this really cerebral calculations for the tempo, but at the same time I never really lost sight of the whole idea of the music. And then because of this wonderful inspiration provided by editor Steffi, I decided that I would turn emotional at some point, but I carried it on. And then we had this thing which they thought would be silent, which was the interview with the Prime Minister when he was talking about his cancer. And I said, no, I will just carry on and just make it carry on into the next thing, because it would be stupid, I mean, disconnected, because, I mean, it's the same situation. I mean, the nation is sick, the king is sick, and everybody feels like shit. So it was basically this cathartic thing of trying to just having this big emotion.
When you showed me this scene for the first time, there is a frame of the policeman, and you told me, okay, I composed this as a sort of soundtrack, which is in his head. Could you say something more about this? Like, or maybe it brings me to I'm wondering about the general idea. Like, if it's like for you the normal process that you, for example, pick up some scene, you try to reflect some emotional movements of the character. You said, okay, it would be sound like this, because this guy on the frame looks like I want to compose the music which is in his head, if you know what I mean.
When you get involved in these situations, I mean they became very, very emotional, because I was there protesting like any other Icelander, but we had some crazy days and nights where people were attacking the police who were protecting the House of the Parliament. And at one point, I mean, we had these young anarchists throwing bricks and glass bottles at the police who were there to do their jobs. And I was looking at these people who were young enough to be my sons, who were standing there, I mean, petrified with fear, but still doing their duty. And one night, I mean, there was a spontaneous movement of people who had come there to protest, who did not like the violence towards the police. So we sort of performed sort of like this protective role. I mean, we stood in front of the policemen and said, okay, throw this shit at us. And that for me was a very big emotional moment. But which I, in a way, really worked into this piece of music. I mean, I don't want to sound very romantic, but every little note, every little beat in this comes from my anger and sadness at the things that happened.
We've seen something, as I labeled, like the communication in between sound design, the authentic situation, and like music composition. Maybe right now I would love to ask you about the scene from the circus film, because if I'm right, like this is the film all made up from the archives, without any strict sound design, without any music from any sound from the spot. That means all the soundtrack is your own musical work. Is there a different approach for you to work to compose music for the scene with the sound from the spot instead of some material without the sound, or it's like somehow the same process?
Well, this documentary I did the music for, which has been a long time in the making, was something I developed with a friend of mine who had been in contact with this wonderful professor in England called Vanessa Tulmin, who is the only person I know who ran away from a circus. When I was young, I always wanted to run away to the circus, but she was brought up in the circus and ran away and became an academic. And I heard an interview with her on BBC Radio many years back, and I was always fascinated by what she was doing. She was collecting these big archives for the University of Sheffield about circuses and vaudeville and all these things. And when my friend Margaret Jónsdóttir came up with this idea that they would do a documentary out of these things, I thought, okay, this is something I would love to do. But I actually contacted two of my friends from Sigur Rós, this group, Icelandic music group, Georg Holm and Orri Páll Dýrason, and Georg's younger brother, Dagur. And I asked them if they would want to participate in this project with me, because I thought, okay, this is bigger than me, and we need to become a circus band. The director, Benedikt Erlingsson, he had actually assembled the film with David Alexander Korno, with, in a way, a very open idea for what the music should be like, except that Benedikt really wanted certain things to jump out of the picture and become real. But in the end, basically what happened was that we decided that we wanted to do a soundtrack that was totally unconnected with people playing drums in the scenes or having whips or doing anything. And so we did a thing which I haven't done since my teens. We became a band. We rehearsed, watched the material. We rehearsed for about 2 weeks, played together, and improvised and stuff like that. And then we went down to writing, because we wanted to become circus artists ourselves. So in a way, we became a circus band, but a very unusual circus band of 4 people. And so because we're very melancholic and depressed Icelanders, and I think that is imposed on the subject. But I'll just show you the beginning, and I'll maybe show you another piece later on.
Hilmar, did I get you right that the process was like that you formed a band,
Yes.
then there was a final cut, and then you, as same as a circus band, played live, mainly improvised to the final cut of the film, or?
No. That was actually one of the ideas, that we would actually play live to the film. But basically, what happened that we just became a band, and we rehearsed the four of us, and sort of found a sound in common, and but also because we're jumping between different scenes. I mean, there are about 11 different approaches in the music through this film. We decided, okay, we'll just put this down, but we always did it like a band, and also because I know these guys really intimately, and I know what they're capable of and what they can do. So I always assumed that Georg would put down some really amazing bass lines, and that Orri would do some amazing percussion. But then, of course, we also changed instruments. I mean, I would play bass in one piece, and Georg would play guitar, and Orri would play keyboards and stuff like that. So that was a part of the process of merging these talents and these ideas together.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we have much more of your work here. Maybe I would like to ask you for that, if I'm right, the Heite film of Jürgen Lett?
Yes.
Yeah. Because when I've seen it first, and I was impressed because it's again, from my point of view, similar situation as the film about the Icelandic crisis, when the sound looks like the sound from the spot, but it's again your music. Maybe we can start with the showing, and then we can talk about.
Yes, I have to maybe have a small introduction, because some of you may know Jørn Lett, who was a guest of this festival some years ago, and who is a documentary filmmaker from Denmark. Jørn lived in Haiti for many years, and shot a documentary there in a period of crisis, when the president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, was about to fall, and you had all these crazy fractions in Haitian politics trying to take over. And he interviewed some really strange people. I mean, like Toto Constant, who I think is shown on screen here, was a killer and a crazy person who somehow got into the position of power. But Haiti is a very crazy nation or a thing, because they say that Haiti is 80% Catholic but 100% voodoo. And Jørn had actually gone to some voodoo ceremonies, and he actually recorded Toto Constant, I mean, in one of these ceremonies. And most of the people involved in the politics were also using the voodoo as a political and a powerful thing, because voodoo is so much a part of the life of these people. I mean, they get their emotional relief through that. And Jørn did some amazing recordings of voodoo rituals, some which were filmed in secret, but the sound was absolutely shit. So suddenly I was there in Denmark in 1994, and he came up with this stuff, and he knew that I was interested in Haiti, I was interested in voodoo, and I had met some people who were voodoo practitioners, and he said, okay, I mean, Hilmar, can you do voodoo music? So I decided, okay, yes, I'll try. And so I sent him an example for this scene, which is about 98% me playing drums. And then when he liked it, me and the sound designer decided that we would use a very voodoo approach for the rest of the soundtrack. Not only the music, but also the sound design. I'll go into that a bit later, but I'll first show you this voodoo scene.
Voodoo played an important role in independence, for example. Voodoo played its role in establishing Haiti's independent nation in the war against the French. Again, the idea that once again people are turning to voodoo in this hour and this crisis, this new crisis for the Haitian nation, Haiti under an embargo. Could you develop that?
No, definitely. I can develop it a little bit now because this is exactly what the situation is. Every time we're in trouble, the people, the population, as soon as they have a problem, you can go in front of the cathedral. You see somebody on his knees asking to a statue, please give me, help me find some money. What we did, what happened is that right now the whole population with the embargo is going back to whatever they have left, which is the spirits.
I call it death by nightmare. It's like I experience a feeling of total paralysis and choking, and that I cannot get up and I cannot wake up and get up and walk. I don't know, I went through analysis for a few years, trying to find out what was behind that nightmare. It's not that clear yet. Maybe when I really die, I will know.
This is a very surreal film, and it's really crazy. And this French photographer who lives in Haiti, lived in Haiti, who is photographing the corpses, because I don't know if you know about how Haiti was ruled during the times of Aristide. But what was done was that people would be killed every day and just thrown out into the streets to make people, the rest of the people know, okay, you could be next. And so she was documenting all these killings and stuff like that. And maybe if I will get into the musical inspiration for this, I was not a newcomer to voodoo or voodoo music when I did this, and which is probably why Jörn picked me to compose, because I had been very much interested in ritual music, and I had attended some rituals in Paris by people who were practicing their variation of voodoo, and I had met some interesting people who had been trained in the voodoo tradition, and there are two schools of voodoo music. One is called rata, which is like solar rhythms, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and the other one is Petro, which is the crazy trance music, where you have all these strange syncopations. And I was aiming for these strange syncopations, and you have syncopations of syncopations. And when we started this film, I met with both Jørn Lett and the sound designer Jens Danielsen, and we decided that we would do a voodoo type of sound design soundtrack, which would not be very linear, which would not be in strict time, but would always move around, and there would be all these crazy syncopations, and which really worked for me. I mean, as a concept, and sometimes I am too serious about concepts. I like to start out with a concept, and usually I throw them out midway, but there the concept work.
In the case that original sound from that voodoo rituals would work, would you compose this voodoo music, or it was like because of the original sound was not usable?
This scene was actually something that really fascinated me, because this was the best footage of a voodoo ceremony, and the sound was shit. So I had to do it, and I actually made 3 attempts. I actually went to Iceland and did the recording with my friend Sigurður Baldursson, who is the best drummer in Iceland, I think. And we tried to have an authentic voodoo thing, but it didn't work. And then in the end, it ended by me sitting in Denmark and recording myself, for 3 or 4 days until I found the right type of rhythm, and then putting it to the scene.
You opened some other clip, maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe I would show you the opening of this film, and as I say, I mean, this was a film I really liked doing, and working with Jørn was a great pleasure, and he. The only thing he said, I mean, Hilmar, I mean, I want you to do music, but be weird. Don't do anything that can be expected. And so I prepared stuff seriously before this, because he wanted some voodoo sounds, and he wanted a lot of percussion. And as I said before, I did some recordings with my friend Sigurður, Icelandic drummer. So a lot of his sounds are there in the intro. So I'll just play you the intro for this film, which is using this idea of syncopations. I mean, nothing is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but.
Obligé de prendre des risques historiques.
I think I'll just show enough of this. But basically, what I got from Jörn was that Haiti is hell and heaven. It's the most beautiful place on earth, and it's the most horrible place on earth. And somehow I try to convey that feeling.
Hilmar, how is the collaboration in between you as a composer and the sound designer? Because sometimes the whole sound stuff, for example, in this Jörgen Latt films, it's like complete dialogue in between sound design, in between the music. Like, so it's like a permanent dialogue also with you and the sound designer, or how it works in your case.
I usually have a big stuff. It's big for me. To work with the sound designer, because we are always occupying the same spectrum of sound, and we are sometimes fighting over the same decibels and the same emotional things. So usually I try to work with a sound designer from day one and prepare things. And I've had wonderful associations with sound designers, and I had horrible associations with sound designers. I've often made a joke of that one decision by my dear friend Kjartan Kjartason lost us an Oscar nomination because he wanted to pull down my music at the moment, because he had recorded these wonderful sounds of a rope, which my music was obscuring, and but I always make sure that I connect with sound designers, and Jens, who did the sound design for this film, is fantastic. He sadly hasn't done that much, because he is very inventive and very crazy. He's this Danish hippie type who would go exactly into every little detail that Jörn wanted, and we connected really well over this, and this was a model collaboration.
Maybe we can move to the other screenings, or maybe I'm wondering about, I don't remember the title of the film, but I'm talking about the one with the pictures and the huskies, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Because when you showed me today, like, I found out something interesting, that's the way of sensitivity. That there is the kind of music which, the music is here, but you don't pay so much attention of the music, which from my point of view it's important part of the, let's say, dokumentárním music. But I'm just saying this because I want to hear what you think about this kind of work.
Well, I did this music to a documentary called Faces of the North, which is about this Icelandic photographer called Ragnar Axelsson, or Roce, who is amazing, because it's, in a way, it was a strange relationship, because usually I need to fall in love with a subject, but in this case I had to fall in love with someone who had fallen in love with the subject. So I was, in a way, this is a person who has been a press photographer for 30 plus years. We're nearly the same age, and I've always known him, and he was always this in a way, a strange type you couldn't approach, because he was not in the same circles as I was. But I started to appreciate his photos, and he has been very much concerned with climate changes, because he has been in Greenland about 50, 60 times. He's been in the Faroe Islands, he's been in Siberia and Mongolia, watching the changes in climate, the glaciers disappearing, the ice melting, the permafrost stuff disappearing, and he in a way became a one-man mission of remembering things how they were, and he recorded people, old faces, and characters that were disappearing, but also cultures that were disappearing. So I made music to this documentary. I'll show 2 clips from that. This is the first one.
As a photographer, I've mostly been inspired by the amazing interplay between man and nature. The photographs I've taken in the last 30 years are my contribution to the people of the North.
Það hefur aldrei hittað meira, svona þó að mældu eins og núna síðustu árin.
I feel that it is a real challenge to struggle in a daily battle against the uncompromising forces of nature, just to survive. The Arctic is now facing a new future where the ice caps are melting faster than ever before. The discussion is turning towards the people who actually live there.
Takk for síst.
Icelandic farmers, fishermen and the great hunters of Greenland are the people who have had to find a way to live in harmony with the Arctic nature. I've been documenting their lives because these people are the human faces of climate change. My photo essays are stories from their everyday lives and give a glimpse into what are possibly the last days of the Arctic.
I do like a simple setup. I don't have a big arsenal of sounds. Most of the sounds I use are stuff, things that I have synthesized myself and have made from organic sources like the wind outside my house and stuff like that, which I have filtered and stuff like that. So there's a recurring, boring and unbelievably repetitive stamp of my music through the ages. I mean, you can listen back to stuff I was doing in 1991, and you have the same crappy stuff because I just like my little palette.
You said we have 2 clips from this film?
Yes. Are there any questions you would like to ask me at this point? I feel like I've been
definitely
been either playing or talking. So.
I have a question about the circus film that we watched. Was it archival footage or was it shot by you? The newer color bit, or
no? It's archival footage, and the oldest footage is from 1892, and it's wonderful stuff. We were lucky enough also to discover some Icelandic circus archival footage. Like the giant we saw in the beginning is Icelandic guy who was paraded around as the tallest man on earth for 20-30 years, and called the Viking giant. And in another clip we have this Icelandic circus artist called Jóhannes Jósefsson, who was like the martial artist. He was like the Bruce Lee of circuses. He could beat 30 people to pulp in 10 seconds. And so we have some wonderful clips of him. And yeah, but it's all archival. I mean, the latest stuff is from the 80s, from the family of Billy Smart, who did some 8mm home movies. So it's fantastic stuff. Because I mean, sadly, I mean, the circus is dying, and we will never have it again as it was.
Já bych se chtěl zeptat, jestli si vybírá téma, nebo jestli prostě odmítá, nebo jestli prostě, když dostane nějakou zakázku, nebo když to řeknu takhle hloupě, tak jestli prostě bere každou, nebo jestli si vybírá určitá témata, nebo co mu je blížší, nebo je mu to jedno, nebo takhle asi bych se zeptal.
Děkuji za otázku, já si ji pokusím přeložit. The question was like, in the case of the subject, what does it mean for you? Like, do you take every offer, or you are choosing very precisely what to do and what not to do? That was the question.
I choose very precisely. I am very lazy, and I would like to do as little as possible. But when a thing that really engages me, I mean, I will die for it. I will kill for it. I mean, so if I get involved in the subject, I mean, I take it very seriously. And what really surprised me when I got this request, because I've been doing music for about 50, 60 films, is that I've done music for so many documentaries, but all the documentaries have been done with a big fiery passion, and I only became involved in them because I loved the subject. But with some of the films I've worked on, the feature films, I've just done it for being able to pay for food.
Yeah, I think that has to be the point. Yeah, the passion. You have to have a passion because there is probably no budget. So nobody pay you for your work to have a food, or am I right with this? Like that you will not be able to do it without the passion.
No, I don't think so. Because I mean, sadly enough, I mean, this may change because, strangely enough, I think I've been making money from documentaries recently, which I never did before, because of things are being shown stuff around television stations all around the world. Like this documentary about Ragnar Axelsson, the Faces of the North, has been going around Europe, being shown around European television stations. So that is actually generating a lot of money and interest. So it was not a calculated risk, but it was just something I really wanted to do because I liked this guy, and I thought I would get to know him stuff better through his film. And maybe I'll just show you a tiny clip. I mean,
can you say more about the film?
Well, it's basically about his his passion for people who are disappearing, characters who are disappearing, cultures which are disappearing. And I connected really seriously because let's see, I'll just find this here. Because I have a keen interest in Greenland and sort of Inuit culture, and I really tried to do a musical project about 20 years ago between Iceland and Greenland. No, more than 25 or 6 years ago, between Iceland and Greenland, because you have this unbelievably long tradition of music which is disappearing very quickly. And these years ago I discovered that it had actually disappeared. The last remains of that tradition were recorded by Danish radio in 1962. And what happened between 1962 and 1983, when I was starting this project, was that the original singers and drummers of the Inuit music, they had died, and nobody had cared to learn what they did. So I mean, it only takes 15 to 20 years for a tradition that is 10,000 years old to die, and I felt really sad about that. And I sort of tried to get together a group of people who from Greenland who were starting to appreciate their own tradition, because they it's a very sad fact that Greenlanders have been looked upon as a tribe of shameful people by Denmark, who is actually the motherland of Greenland, and they are in a way ostracized and stuff put aside, and have been stripped of their heritage and everything. But I got to know a number of young artists who were working in theater, had trained in theater and creative traditions, and tried to do a musical project. And we found some old drums and we recorded them, and we listened to the old recordings by Danish radio, but of course we found out it's not coming back. And then later on I actually decided on this big project with some friends of mine that we wanted to document the music of the circumpolar regions, stretching from Alaska to Mongolia, because you have this unbelievable rich culture of circumpolar music, storytelling, chanting, and poetry that reaches all around the globe, which was once connected. So when you hear music from Alaska, I mean, you will hear echoes of that music in Mongolia or Tibet. So that was a project we tried to get together for 10 years. We nearly got money for it, but it totally collapsed and probably will never be done. But the idea was still there. But so I brought that sort of passion or this interest to the film about Ragnar, and this wonderful character we see. I mean, I met him, and he was a part-time player in a film I did music for, called Beowulf and Grendel, and he was a wonderful character. I mean, once you saw him and you remembered him, and Ragnar, the photographer, has a perfect eye for these types of characters. But I'll let the clip carry on into Greenland, so you will see Iceland, Greenland.
William was great. I often went to take photographs of him because he had the nation's history recorded in his face. You could smell the sea in his beard. The first few times I visited him, he was very difficult. It was like confronting a wild animal.
No.
Guðjón cursed all the time. I think he was testing me, seeing how I would react. I looked into his eyes. He had the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. They were like the sky. I always checked upon Guðjón if I was passing by his farm, and I often bought something for him to eat. If it wasn't there, I just left it by the front door. He didn't eat much towards the end, but I was told that he always ate what I brought. That showed that he trusted me. When my first book was published in 2004, Faces of the North, I had an exhibition down by the ocean in his honor. It lasted for 5 minutes, and then the ocean came and washed it all away. The book with a photograph of Guðjón on the cover was one of the biggest turning points in my career. I felt I could really start working more for my own heart, and that I had found the incentive to tell the stories that I really wanted to tell. Guðjón was about 80 when he died. I just can't remember how many times I've been to Greenland to take photographs. In the past 25 years, I must have been to just about every village on both the east and the west coast. I've slowly been documenting the incredible life that Inuit hunters lead there, photographing a type of existence that is changing very fast.
Hey! Vent lidt. Jeg har lige snakket med din far. Er det dit hus? Det er når du var lille. Det er dig. Den der. Ja. Kender du dine venner på billederne? Nej. Og jeg der slikker igen. Og en til din far.
When I first went to Kanak, I went hunting with the great Masana. He was a really skilled hunter. On my first trip, there was a blizzard and we had to wait for a few days before heading out on the Arctic ice. I was getting kind of impatient. because I was looking forward so much to going out and seeing the country. For me, it was like going back in time and entering a world that I had only read about in books. Then suddenly finding out that it's a fantastic place to take photographs in. They don't let many people accompany them. I had to earn their trust before taking out the camera.
Helper, are we here?
Yeah.
You're here?
Yeah.
So come with everyone?
Yeah, over here.
Yeah, okay. En anok, 2 narvaler og 3 seler. Okay.
Muskos.
Ja, også.
It was interesting to see men like Masana, how they perceive nature and their environment. Hunting usually involves a lot of waiting and hanging about. Once I was with Masana, and all of a sudden he started walking about, staring and sniffing the air. Then he asked me to walk quietly on the ice and whisper the word, whale. I didn't see anything, only ice and open sea, but a few minutes later a whale surfaced. Masana was ready. He took to his kayak that was tailor-made for him. Masana was such a broad and massive man. He was like an Olympic rower as he set out in the kayak. Then he stopped beside an iceberg, and as soon as the whale returned, he went after it, and in a flash, he had harpooned it.
Hey there.
Yeah, this is actually a very good example of the last part. I mean, because I'm using stuff, modern synthesizer sounds. So I'm using some authentic drums from Greenland, some authentic drums from America, and but also Mongolian fiddle, because as I was saying before, the Inuit music tradition has been disappearing. But so I know I'm committing some sort of forgery by imposing a musical universe on this thing, but it feels emotionally right, and so I'm trying not to feel guilty about that.
That means we are again, as you said before, by the concept. You said concept is always important for you. What does it mean precisely? Like, does that concept has to be a particular part of the topic of the documentary, or does it somehow connected with that sign of authenticity? You said you have a film from Greenland. That means you use the drums from Greenland. Does this small approaches, does it important in your work for documentaries?
I think I always start out in good faith and then I cheat. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I would like to be really honest and true in whatever I do, but usually at some point you find out that you have to do something different. I would very much like to see myself as a person who tries to follow vision, and I certainly like visionaries, and the people I work with usually are people that have great ideas, and that is why I'm drawn to them. But sometimes you will have to make compromises.
Which was the biggest compromise you had to do? One example you remember, maybe the traumatic one.
Actually, I'm quite lucky. I mean, there are not that many. I mean, I've worked with people which I thought were fantastic to begin with, and turned out to be shit in the middle of the process. But I managed to carry things on. I will not mention any names. But I think mostly what became traumatic was that they lost faith in their own work. That is the worst thing, to work with a director who is thinking that his film is failing and is trying to bolster it up in the post-production, which can't be done. I mean, you can have a semi-good film with fantastic music, which will make it slightly better, but you can't have a crap film with fantastic music, which will make it uncrappy. So I mean, I'm not the person who will save a project at the time when it is shit.
Yeah, I think no one can do this, but it's good to hear that music will not save your film. If I ask you, like, is there any, as a signature or something in common for your music, let's say for documentaries, what would be the answer? Do you think you have something like signature, something which is really common for you?
I think, as I said before, that I usually work with a similar palette of sounds, and usually because of financial restrictions. I mean, I always love to have one solo instrument. I would love to have a vocal artist, usually a female vocalist, to work with me, preferably a string quartet, and sometimes a guitar player, which I had this wonderful guitar player in
the singers, that was the one at the Icelandic film.
Stuff. But that one, we didn't have any financial restrictions. I mean, it was just at that time. It's one of the best projects I've worked on, because there were no worries about finances. I mean, we had everything we needed, and I don't know what the time is. I mean, are you getting bored or?
The boring is not a question, but we still have we still can use 27 minutes together. So maybe that's like a push-up for you, audience, for your questions. If you don't have any, you can. Yes.
Do you choose the moments when you add music in the film? And sometimes do you think that it's not necessary?
I usually choose the moments when I feel that there is need for music, and mostly actually I think I tend to do more music than the director wanted, and funnily enough, I mean, it hasn't been rejected yet, because there are little moments which I find fascinating, which may have stuff in a way that the director thought that would stand on its own. But as I say, I usually have a very good relationship with the directors I'm working with, so it's always a good collaboration and usually a very serious discussion.
Any other questions?
I was wondering, when you do music for documentaries from certain place, like Greenland or Haiti, if you need to actually know the place, or if you do any research or something, or it's more important just how you feel about the place and you don't actually need to know the place or travel to Haiti?
I would very much have liked to travel to Haiti because of this film, but I had been passionate about Haiti for a long time before this film came up, which is probably why Jörn thought about me. because when I was very young, I started corresponding with this really crazy person who was he had been sent as an Anglican priest over to Haiti to convert the Haitians to Christianity, but he had been converted to voodoo and became a voodoo priest, and so I was corresponding with him, and he was telling me all these crazy voodoo things, and that is also, I mean, how I became interested in the music of voodoo, which is not only in Haiti, but it's also in the Dominican Republic, and you have variations in the Côte d'Or, the Gold Coast, and so I attended in 1979. I attended some voodoo rituals in Paris, where I learned the voodoo drumming. And so I had a background and I had an insight into it. And for me, I mean, that was very important because I really wanted to embody the tradition that was there. And so I always try to make some research. I've been to Greenland a number of times. I've been trying to research Inuit music in Greenland and in Alaska, and I've been in a way interested in these cultures for a long time.
The question was about your interest. How did your interest or your passion for music start out, and what was your kind of background? How did you study it? And was there a moment when you decided that you were going to compose music for films and work with filmmakers specifically, as opposed to be a standalone, let's say, composer? I'm not sure how to put it. And is there a big difference between the two? How would you describe why you made the decision?
This probably goes really back to childhood, because when I was born, my father went off to study in Germany, and me and my mother stayed behind in my grandparents' house. And on the top floor were my grandmother's sister and her husband, who was the main organist, church organist in Reykjavik, and a famous composer, and he became my babysitter. So from when I could walk, I would go with him to the city cathedral in Reykjavik, where he would practice every day. So I would sit at the organ with him and pull out the organ stops and stuff like that. So I don't remember my life without music. I was totally immersed with music. And later on I started to study the violin and the piano. But I was always told that in order to be a great musician, I would have to practice for 10 to 12 hours a day. And I was so lazy, as I told you before. So at the age of 11 or 12, I thought, okay, I mean, I'll probably not be a brilliant musician, but I could maybe be something else. Then the devil came into my life in the guise of rock music, because I had never listened to any kind of rock music, and I became a total convert, and I threw away my violin and my piano and started to play drums, and which occupied me for a long time. But I could never really get away from the old things, because I was always the one who was picking out the melodies, and I always heard these how can I say it? I always heard some end results in my head, how things would have to be. So I was always composing music and always arranging music in my head. And it was only in my late teens when I started to do it, I mean, on paper. And I became also at the same time fascinated with technology. And so I always wanted to become an archaeologist. That was my aim in life. I failed miserably. And but so I ended up composing music. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know what I've done in a former life to deserve this.
Yeah, honestly, I think it was a good decision. Maybe you would be perfect archaeologist, but the music composing is also not bad. Is there any other questions? Okay, if it's not so, I will have maybe some. I'm still. I would like to maybe go back to the process. It's like when you told me that you have a rough cut and you composed usually by the rough cut. Is it your decision where to put the music, or it's like director's decision? Hey, Hilmar, I need a music in here, over there. Like, if you know what I mean. Like, if it's like the director told you, okay, Hilmar, I need a music in this part, or you see the rough cut and you decided, okay, this would need silence, this would need music. How it is usually?
I think mostly, I mean, I have very clear ideas about where to put music and what type of music is needed in a scene. And but I always listen to the director. I mean, that is something which is very helpful sometimes, because also the director usually has sort of in a way a total vision of the work, where I may have to begin with a very fragmented sort of version. I mean, I may be sort of seeing this as 25 potential music sequences or 40 or whatever. But I mean, he has a message in mind about the film or the project. So I think it's very important for me, I mean, to meet up with the director and talk with him or her about, I mean, what is he trying to convey? I mean, what is the message of the film? Because usually, I mean, it's done for a purpose. I mean, you don't do a documentary because, I mean, you want to just show things, but you want to tell people about stuff.
If I ask you maybe a completely stupid question, but I need to ask, how would you describe the most terrible way of music in documentary films?
I think the 1960s were not very good to music and documentaries. So I was brought up with a lot of crappy stuff, documentaries in my youth. And also, I think that, as I say, there was a sad period in music in the early 60s, when you could get away with a lot of things because it was being experimental. And I remember curdling my toes as a child, looking at some films. But thankfully, I've forgotten most of them.
And if I ask directly opposite, like, how would you describe something which completely fits?
I think, I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's not to do with music in itself, but maybe a documentary that is thought-provoking and is telling you something, is teaching you something. I think I've seen documentary films that have changed my life. I mean, there are not that many feature films that have changed my life. I mean, I could maybe count 5 or 6 or 7 of them, but I mean there are documentaries which have told me about things that I hadn't known before, and have made me think about things differently afterwards. So I think, I mean, the documentary film is an incredibly powerful tool, which I respect deeply, and I think, I mean, with one documentary film, I mean, you can change the world. I mean, really. I mean, that's at least my idealistic view. And I think, like, I mean, this documentary about Ragnar Axelsson, about the climate changes in the north. I mean, I think that is having a big impact, and hopefully it is, because we'll be seeing the glaciers in Greenland disappearing in 60 years. And hopefully it will make somebody think about it. But if you would have a film like Miss Smilla's Sense of Snow, I mean, which was done 20 years back, I mean, it will not change anybody's mind. But a good documentary will.
This is probably the moment for the last questions from your side, dear audience.
Your religiosity and like Icelandic religious movement, like pagan movement, if you're part of that.
Okay. I'm being outed here as a horrible pagan. No, part of my identity, I mean, all my adult years has been, I never felt okay with being Christian, and I fell in love with the old religion of my ancestors, which is called Ásatrú, in my early teens. And when I was 14 years old, I was lucky enough that the old pagan religion in Iceland was being revived. And on my 16th birthday, I could actually sign myself out of the state Lutheran Church, and I became Ásatrúar and have remained so ever since. But I've always been really interested in religion, and I see myself as a very religious person, and which is probably reflected by many choices I've done in the films I do, because I want a film to be more realistic or have some higher purpose than just being entertainment. And actually, funnily enough, this clip that I'm going to show you to the end, I mean, I called it Lila, which is Sanskrit meaning dance, and it's a sequence of dance through in circus through 110 years or 20 years nearly, and but the idea is one of the aspects of the god Shiva in Hinduism is Nagarjuna, who is the lord of the dance, and who keeps the universe alive by dancing, and which I think is a wonderful image, that you have a dancing god that makes all of us exist. And for you who are studying physics, I think there are at least 20 or 30 of you in the audience. There's a wonderful anecdote about dancing in stuff modern physics, because John von Neumann, who was this great physicist, he phoned a friend of his and said, "Okay, I've figured out why all electrons in the universe have the same mass and the same energy, and it's all the same electron." So basically, his idea was that you have this one electron who is constantly traveling around, meeting all the positrons and making us exist in due course traveling through time and everything, and which for me is like this idea of the god Shiva dancing our existence. And I'll just show you this clip about dancing and leave you to it.
Yes, it would be nice. you want to say something, Hilmar?
I'm actually speechless. I mean, this woman, in the end, I'm just totally. I mean, I've been working with this woman for hundreds of hours, and she still amazes me.
So in this case, I would like to thank you all for the patience and concentration, but mainly I would love to thank you, Hilmar, for your thoughts, and again, thank you for the music.
Okay. Thank you for coming.